Alright guys, in the last video we talked about the document object model and what it is. So now I want to dive into it. Now there's a lot to cover. What I want to do in this video is just look at some of the properties of the document object. In the last video of the last section, we briefly looked at the window object, which is basically the global object of the browser environment. And we saw that document is actually a property of that window object. So what I want to do now is examine that document object a little bit. Not so much the methods that it offers, but the properties, which are basically like attributes of it. Now in the next video, we're going to look at selectors like getElementById, which are methods of the document object. But in this video, we're going to look at some of the properties. Okay, I'm going to show you how we can select elements directly, but doing it this way isn't recommended because there's easier ways using selectors, which, like I said, we'll get into in the next video. But I do think that you should at least know that that's a possibility and know how that works. All right, now you're probably wondering what this user interface is on the side over here. This is what we're going to use to do our exploration for this section. It gives us a DOM tree to work with and explore. Now the section after this will be our first project section. We'll actually build 3 different projects. And the first one will be creating this application, making this work so that we can actually add a task. It'll get put down here. We'll be able to delete them, clear them. We'll even implement local storage. But right now, this is just HTML. This is just a UI. It doesn't actually do anything. But we're going to use this as our interface to explore the DOM and learn about it, learn about selectors, how to traverse up and down the DOM, how to add things, remove things, replace things, all kinds of stuff. All right, and this is all stuff that people use jQuery for, and jQuery is not needed with the advancements of JavaScript. Okay, and you're going to see that in this video, in this section. Now, as far as the UI, when we get to the actual project in the next section, we're gonna hand code all the HTML. But for now, you can just grab it from your project files and use that file. And I'll just quickly go over it. So we're using Materialize CSS, which is a CSS framework. We're just including the CDN. We're also using the Font Awesome CDN so that we can have these delete icons. All right, then down here we just have basically a card. Okay, this whole box, it's wrapped in a materialized card. And we have a little form here with a button, a task list. Okay, so this is actually a UL, which is right here. So UL with the class of collection, and then each list item has a class of collection item. And then inside there we have some text, which is all the same for each one. And then we have a link, which has inside of that an icon from Font Awesome, which is just this X mark. All right, so it's a pretty simple UI. Then we just have the clear tasks at the bottom. And then we have, for JavaScript, we have jQuery included only because it's a dependency of Materialize, which is right here. We're not using jQuery at all in this course. Okay, that's the point of this course, is to get developers away from jQuery and into just using vanilla JavaScript. All right, and then maybe moving on to a framework like React or Angular. And then, of course, we're including our app.js file. All right, so let's jump into our app.js, which is completely empty at the moment. Now, as you saw in the last section of the last video of the last section where we looked at window, we can look at all the things included in the window object, and document is one of them. Okay, so this is what we're going to be exploring. So we can call document dot and any of this stuff here. So let's go over here in app.js, and what I'm going to do is just initialize a variable called val. I'm not going to assign it to anything at first, just initialize it and then do a console log down here. That way we don't have to do a bunch of console logs throughout this script. We can just set things to val, and it'll just reassign from the next one and keep going down. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is assign val equal to document. All right, and let's save that and see what it gives us. So it gives us the entire document. So from the doc type, which if we look at index.html and we go up to the top, so from the doc type down to the bottom ending HTML tag, so the entire thing, and everything's included. You can see we have our head and body. If we go ahead and extend the head. We can see everything in there. We can see everything inside the body. So that's what just the document gives us if we were to if we look at that. Now, when working with the DOM, we have different types of structures that we can get. So, for instance, an HTML collection, which is kind of like an array, but kind of not. It's formatted like an array with brackets and comma-separated values, but you can't use, for instance, a for each loop on it, which is an array method. And then you have node lists, for example, which are also like arrays, but you can use for each loops on them. So we're going to go over all that stuff later on, but just to let you know, if you want to select, if you want to basically get an array, an HTML collection from the entire document, you can do document.all. So if we take a look at what that gives us, for some reason when I try to expand that, it doesn't work, but you can see from here that it looks like an array. It's in brackets. We have HTML, head, meta, meta, meta. So it's starting at the top of the document, which if we look at our HTML, starting with the, not the doc type, but the first element, which is HTML, then the head tag, then the meta, then another meta, 3 metas, and then the link tag, and it's just going to keep going down. So that gives us a collection. Now, just like with an array, you can access certain indexes. So if we want the first one, it's 0 base, just like an array, so we can say all 0, and let's go ahead and save that, reload, and you can see it gives us the HTML element. If we do 1, that gives us the head. If we do 2, I'm sure you can guess what that'll give us. It'll give us this meta tag here. So if we save and look, it gives us that first meta tag. So you can access indexes or items in the collection like you would with an array. All right, so next thing I want to do is actually I want to show you that we can do properties as well. So we could do like length and save, and that shows us that there's 43 elements in the DOM. Now if I were to go to the index file and let's delete, like, let's say the input, and save, now we have 42. So that'll count all of the elements in the DOM. Now we can also access, for instance, the head alone. If we say document.head, that'll give us just the head. We can also do the body. Okay, that'll give us the body. We can get things like the doc type. So if we say document.doctype, it shows the HTML5 doc type. If we were using XHTML, it would show us that doc type. We can get the domain. So domain will give me the loopback address because I'm on my local host. We can also do URL. That will give you the whole thing, including the protocol and the port and the page. We can get the character set. All right, so if you ever need any of these things in your application, you can easily access. And we can get the content type. So content type, this is an HTML page, so we'll get text/HTML. All right, so enough of those types of properties. Now I want to show you that we can actually select stuff without using selectors. It's not recommended, but it is possible. So for example, if we wanted to get all the forms on the page, we could do document.forms and save, and you'll see we get an HTML collection. And if I expand this, you'll see that it's an HTML collection, and it has one form with the index of 0, and that's this form here. If I were to add another form to the HTML, it would have another one with the index of 1. And I can access just this form if I wanted to by simply adding an index of 0. And now it gives me the form. Okay. If I were to do form 1, it's going to give me undefined because there is no form at that index. All right. So let's see. Another thing we can do is we can get stuff from that form if we want. So if we were to say form 0, we could do .id, and that gives us the ID. We could get the method, for example. Forms have methods like get and post. You can see that it's get. We can do the action, which it doesn't have one, but if I were to go to the form tag in the HTML and say action equals let's say index.php and save, it'll give me that index.php file. Okay. We can also do this with links. So for example, if we want to say val equals document.links, and you can see it gives us a collection with 6 links, and it's showing these 5 links here, and then this one here. You can see the last one is the clear tasks, and we can access certain links. So if we were to say 0, that'll give us the first one. If I hover over it, you'll see it'll highlight in the DOM or in the browser up here. And I can also get things like the ID. I don't think it has an ID, so it's not going to give me anything. I could get the classes. So if I do class name, that gives you a string of all the classes. So we have delete item and secondary content. If we look in the HTML, delete item and secondary content. Now you can also get a collection of classes, and you can do that with class list. Oops, that should be dot class list. And you see we get a collection. Actually, it's a DOM token list of the different classes. And if you wanted to access a specific one, you could put an index. Like let's say we want the delete item. We'll save that and we'll get that specific class. All right, so let's see. We can also do this with images. So if we say document.images, now we don't have any images. So what it's going to give us is an empty collection. But if we did, they'd be put in that collection. We can do the same thing with scripts. So this will give us all the scripts that are linked. We have 3 of them, so it's talking about these 3 down here. So jQuery, Materialize, and our app.js file. Now we can also get attributes. So let's say we wanted to get one of these scripts. So scripts, let's take 2, which will be our app.js, and let's do get attribute and say we want to get the source attribute. So if we save it, that should give us app.js, okay, because it's the 3rd script, this one here, and it's the source attribute. Now, like stuff like this, get attribute, I don't want to get too deep into now because we will be talking about this stuff later on, these kinds of methods. Now, another thing I want to mention is that HTML collections, if you want to turn them into an array so that you can use things like for each, which you can't by default use with a collection, you can go ahead and do that. Actually, first of all, I'll show you what happens if we try to do a for each with a collection. So I'm going to just create a variable called scripts. Actually, we'll make this a let. Let's say let scripts equals document.scripts, and then we'll say scripts.forEach. For each takes in a callback function, and don't worry about any of this, we're going to get into all of this later on. We'll say script, and then we'll try to console log each script and save. We get an error saying scripts.forEach is not a function because for each is for arrays only. So to basically convert this to an array, what I could do is take that scripts, and actually let's create a new variable and we'll call it scripts. I can't type. Scripts array, and all we have to do is say array.from and then pass in the HTML collection, and then we'll just go ahead and change this to scripts array.forEach. And now you can see it's looping through and giving us each script tag. Now we could use the get attribute if we want. So if I go ahead and grab that and put it onto the console log and save, now it's going to give us each source attribute. Okay. Now, if this stuff is overwhelming you and you're not understanding it, don't worry about it. As we move along, you're going to get more familiar with it. I just wanted to kind of give you an idea of what is available globally to the document object. We're going to be getting into more practical things like using selectors to select stuff from the DOM rather than doing it this way. And then we'll also go over things like class list, class name, get attribute, all these different methods that are available to us. We'll talk about more in depth, in addition to structures like HTML collections. All right, so in the next video, we're going to talk about DOM selectors to get single elements. So for instance, if we wanted to grab this button or grab this link or this list item, we can do that with DOM selectors. All right, so that's it. I will see you in the next video.